Hi everyone and welcome to this webinar. It is indeed National Reconciliation Week and we're very fortunate to be joining us today members from the Board of Directors of ADAN, the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Network. There will be an opportunity today for question and answer at the end of today's presentation. So we'd really encourage you to enter your questions into the chat function at the bottom or the top of your screen. Simply move your cursor, you'll find the chat function and we will be happy to receive your questions. I'm now going to hand over to CEO of NADA, Robert Sterling, but before I do, I would like to introduce Rachel Wallace, who will provide an acknowledgement of country. Thanks, Rachel.
Hi everyone, thanks Susie. Welcome to today's Reconciliation Week event. I'm Rachel Wallace, I'm the Aboriginal Program Manager at NADA. I'd like to acknowledge traditional owners on the land where we are meeting today. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge the Aboriginal people that are in the room today and also acknowledge your country where you're from and your elders past and present. So this week's Reconciliation Week. So personally for me this week is reconciliation. I think we've got a long way to go. While we've got a lot of allies in this area and we're moving forward, there's a long way to go. We're still overrepresented in our prisons. We're overrepresented with the children that have been Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children that have been removed. So just other things like and our disadvantage in our communities. So
thanks, Rachel. My name is Robert Sterling. I'm the CEO at NADA. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're all meeting on today. And I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as our presenters today who are going to be sharing their wisdom with us all and to any Aboriginal people online. This year's theme of National Reconciliation Week is more than a word. Reconciliation takes action, and NADA is committed to action on reconciliation and have unwavering support for the Uluru Statement from the Heart. NADA recently held our conference on enhancing connections, and one of the highlights for me and the NADA team and many of the participants was setting the scene of the conference through the connection to Aboriginal culture. We started with a smoking ceremony and we heard from young Aboriginal people with lived experience that spoke about their stories of accessing alcohol and other drug treatment. We heard of the views from Aboriginal workers and we launched the model of care for the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Residential Rehabilitation Network. This, along with this week's National Reconciliation Week theme, still resonates with us all. As a sector, we need more than words, we need action. Central to that commitment are NADA's values of collaboration, respect, integrity, and inclusion. I think as organisations, we often tend to focus on objectives that we all have as part of our strategic plans, but we can lose sight of the values that drive us in delivering those objectives. At NADA, we seek to actively apply these values to take action to reduce alcohol and drug-related harms for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We do this by supporting our Aboriginal community control members, by building the capacity of our mainstream alcohol and other drug services to provide culturally safe care and support, and by supporting Aboriginal workers across all of our member services. I hope that today's webinar can provide us with great insights on how we can support Aboriginal workers. And again, I'd like to thank our presenters today, the ADAN board, for sharing their insights with us. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks very much, Robert. I really appreciate that. I'd like to now have the ADAN board introduce themselves to you and then hand over to the chair, Martin Neen, to tell us a little bit about ADAN, the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Network.
My name's Kylie Paulson. I work with Honey New England Health as an Aboriginal health worker. I focus on AOD, based in Newcastle. And I sit on ADAN Board of Directors.
As I said before, my name's Rachel Wallace. I work at NADA part-time as an Aboriginal Program Manager. I also work part-time with Lives If Well. I'm also the Board of Director of Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Network.
I am Lee Lawrence. I'm a team leader at Nunamura in Nowra and also Board of Director of ADAN.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Martin Neen. I work with Hunter New England Local Health District as the manager for the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol team, and I'm the current chair for ADAN.
My name's Kurt Simpson. I work at Katungal, also with the Sapphire Health and Wellbeing. I'm a drug and alcohol worker and sit on the board of directors for ADAN.
Steve Taylor from Wedgley. I'm the drug and alcohol field worker for Wedgley Centre.
Good afternoon, my name's Warren Field. I'm the Substance Use Counsellor at the South Coast AMS. I also facilitate the men's group. I've been on the board of ADAN.
Good afternoon, my name's Brad Freeman and I'm with the Aboriginal Medical Service in Redfern. I coordinate and manage the drug and alcohol unit there. I've been on the board of ADAN for a few years and hopefully another few years to go. Thank you.
So thanks, Susie. I've got a short while to talk about ADAN and what ADAN is and how we support our Aboriginal AOD workforce across New South Wales. So ADAN is the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol Network for New South Wales. We started back in 2003. We had a short or small forum as a result of the Grog Summit back then. Since then, back then we had 40 members or 40 people attend and they became members of ADAN. So since then, we have then moved in under the AHNMRC, the Aboriginal Health and Medical Research Council, as one of their projects under the drug and alcohol program. That was a good partnership. And we were one of their programs. We were quite successful as their program. And then in 2019, we started to look at how we could become our own entity and our own organisation. We did a lot of work as a board around that, and we were successful in April 2020. So just on a year ago, we became an incorporated body. We're still ADAN, and as an incorporated body, we are now promoting ourselves across the state as well as nationally. We have done some presentations or some present papers at national conferences as well as within the state, and we're about to sign today or later this afternoon a partnership agreement with NADA. So that will be our first partnership signing, and we're excited about that. We've been working with NADA for some years now, so we want to formally agree to how we work together and how we can best help each other. I guess when we're looking at supporting our AOD workforce across the state, we have a membership of just over 100 Aboriginal health workers whose primary focus in their job is drug and alcohol. And then we have a membership of not quite 60 associate members. And associate members include Aboriginal workers in other fields, such as mental health or SUB, who also provide assistance and support to Aboriginal drug and alcohol clients. And then the rest of our associate members are made up of non-Aboriginal members or non-Aboriginal staff who work within our local health districts, our NGOs and our Aboriginal medical services, who also have a focus, or their primary focus is AOD. We have grown, as I said, from 40 to in excess of 100 members. And the way we provide support, we have just started this year to take our support across 4 regions within New South Wales. And 4 of our board members have become facilitators, one member for each region. So their role is to contact each of our Aboriginal drug and alcohol workers, provide them with a date, a time, and then provide them with support within that particular region, rather than try and bring everyone together from across the state, which would be a huge task. We did that initially. We had a Zoom meeting with all of our members, inviting all of our members to join. It went quite well, and we had some good participation, some really good questions and answer time. Since then, we have had a forum here in Sydney for Sydney Metropolitan Central Coast region. We have one coming up in a week for those workers on the North Coast from Taree up through to the Queensland border. Again, this month, there'll be a forum held for the western side of the Great Divide, so from Tenterfield in through to Moree and down through the Hunter Valley, stopping just before Newcastle. We have a western region, which is from Moree out to the South Australian border, and it will go down, I think, down to Bathurst from memory. And then the bottom part of the state is our fourth region. So the intent for those regional forums is to provide even more support to our members. We initially plan to start with a Zoom meeting and then progress to a face-to-face. Those face-to-face meetings will allow our members to have the opportunity to network face-to-face, obviously, but to also raise concerns, issues that they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis, somewhere to debrief with their colleagues and other drug and alcohol workers, maybe raise some issues. From an ADAN perspective, we don't have a lot of power when it comes to the workforce and providing workforce support. I think it's something that we could work on and become a strong advocate in that particular area. But at the moment, we are really keen to support our workforce. Once we do that, we have just recently, and I know I'm probably going over time, but recently another project that we're involved in was our cultural audit tool. The cultural audit tool, the concept behind that is phase 1 and 2, we had 12 non-Aboriginal organisations from across the state, including ACT, where they were contacted, they'd agreed to be participants within the program. The board members then did some training on how to undertake an audit and how to be the auditor. And we had 2 auditors attend each of the 12 organisations and conduct an audit. The audit was designed with input from Rachel, which is a really great opportunity for us to have Rachel represent ADAN, obviously. So it was a great opportunity for ADAN to have input into I think, such a successful tool. It wasn't designed to lay blame on any organisation, but it was designed to look at how they're providing services to Aboriginal clients, Aboriginal communities. And then they were provided with a report and feedback around, have you thought of doing this, rather than, well, you're not doing this, you should be. So we were providing ideas and slight changes that they could make to provide or improve their service to our Aboriginal clients. To date, as I said, we finished phase 1. We're almost finished phase 2. We're hoping to finish that maybe early July and then provide a report to the funding body. After July, we're really keen to start a phase 3 and look at 12 new organisations across the state. So, we may be contacting some of you very soon around participating in our cultural audit. I'm sure you have heard that we have a symposium. We have had an annual symposium I think 18 years, we've missed 2 years, and that was unfortunately due to funding. And the concept behind our symposium, it's our annual conference. We, the ADAN board, developed the agenda. We bring along, or we invite keynote speakers, and we send out registration forms, obviously. I think the highest we have received for registration has been just over 80, which is a huge achievement for us. We also allow an opportunity for our delegates or our members to present abstracts on programs that they're currently running or they have run that is really successful within their own community. It's also an opportunity to network with outside of your region. I know that, as I said, we're doing regional meetings. This is an opportunity to network at a state level and to also look at raising questions with keynotes, as well as our partners, the ministry, NADA and AHNMRC, as well as an opportunity to raise questions or just to chat with our keynote speakers. So I'm going to leave it there. I think I've out-talked everyone.
No, that's great. No, that's brilliant, Martin. All of the projects that Martin's talking about, the one that was funded by a coalition of 6 PHNs and the support of the Aboriginal workforce are really key and fit beautifully with this idea of what is it that we, of all Australians, are doing to support Aboriginal people, to promote their wisdom and their knowledge. And it really brings us quite neatly to a couple of questions that we have for the Board of Directors of ADAN. And I actually might start with yourself, Kurt. One of the first things that I wanted to talk to the panel about is what have been some of the challenges for you as an Aboriginal worker working in the drug and alcohol sector?
Some of the challenges are getting clients into rehabs. That's a massive barrier because, you know, we ring up and there could be a wait list of up to 4 or 5 months. You know, it's sort of like the client wants to do it, so it's easy for us to say yes, we can do it, but then it comes back on them to go on the waiting list, and then once you hear that, then the client just goes missing and sort of doesn't want to do rehab because the wait list is too long.
And so for you, Kurt, have you worked in both Aboriginal community controlled and non-Aboriginal services in your experience?
Yes, so I currently work with Katungal, which is an AMS in Bega, but I also work in a consortium that's called the Sapphire Health and Wellbeing, and that's with directions from Canberra.
And as an Aboriginal man, what's your experience of working in the sector? What are some of the things that have been a challenge to you? Obviously, trying to be that connection with your clients into services, as you said, is a challenge. But what are some of the challenges for you as an Aboriginal man working in the sector?
I think some of the challenges are trying to push how Aboriginal people are and how we actually operate, because we're different. We act different to how Australians act, and our culture is much different. But it's hard to push how we work as Aboriginal people and try and teach non-Aboriginal people on how our actions are and how we deal better with a connection type of a person. So it's hard to get that over to other workers on how Aboriginal people are. They like to listen and learn, but then it's trying to make that connection with the Aboriginal worker, with the client.
Kylie, I can see you nodding there. What for you, you can relate to what Kurt's talking about? Are there things that have been particular for you as an Aboriginal person working in the sector and trying to get that message across?
Yes, working with the LHT, it has been a challenge because, as Kurt said, working, trying to get some of those workers that have never worked with Aboriginal workers has been hard. When you have a new worker come in, sometimes it's more doing cultural awareness than your job itself.
Right.
Teaching them cultural awareness, even though they have to do the cultural awareness as a job when they start as a mandatory training, you're still doing cultural awareness as well as the job that you're doing. So it's a constant, it's constantly everyday thing doing cultural awareness beside the job you're doing with other workers.
So alongside your duties that go with your role is that need to be providing that cultural awareness all the time.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Martin?
I agree with that. Like on a daily basis, I'm actually Kylie's manager, and we have not issues, but we raise concerns around non-Aboriginal staff who are working with Aboriginal clients, and some days it appears that they're almost fearful of taking on an Aboriginal client, and then they rely on, for instance, Kylie to come in and work with that Aboriginal client. There's nothing wrong with working with our mob. I mean, we're exactly the same as non-Aboriginal people. We drink, we breathe, our blood's still red. So I don't understand some of these issues around, we don't know what to say, we don't know how to act, we don't know what questions to ask. We're a little bit nervous around approaching an Aboriginal client. So that's difficult, and I can understand the difficulty for non-Aboriginal staff doing assessments and counselling. I can see it from their point, but I also see it from the Aboriginal workers' perspective and from an Aboriginal client's perspective as well.
So Lee, for you, when you're hearing about that, I suppose it's that idea that perhaps some organisations might direct all Aboriginal clients to the one, often Aboriginal worker. What are some of the challenges that you've experienced in that regard?
Yeah, because then that Aboriginal client gets so overwhelmed and so overworked that you then lose that Aboriginal worker because it's too much. And then there's no one that they can go in to have support with either because they're the only Aboriginal worker in that place. I'd like to see us move. What I find challenging is we need to move right away from the little black box that you tick. We need to move away from that. It needs to be an investment. If I say, oh, I want to be, knowledgeable or culturally aware of Chinese people, it doesn't mean that I sit down and watch a 1 hour awareness video at my induction of work. It means that I invest in wanting to know about their culture, wanting to know how to work with them, wanting to know why I should be able to work with them, rather than just going, I have Kylie on the team, so I'll chuck everybody to Kylie. And that needs, and when we go and do these audits, that comes out really well because we do them and they go, oh, how do we do this? And then we come back and just go, wow, you invested in working with Aboriginal people.
Fantastic. And Steve, for you, you've worked in a couple of different organisations, have you? Have you worked in both Aboriginal community controlled and non-Aboriginal community controlled, or just Aboriginal community controlled? What was it that drew you what did you select to be working in an Aboriginal community controlled organisation?
I sort of fell into it.
Yeah.
It was sort of just to move by friends and room with it. Really.
And do you feel like there's something that's offered there in that environment that is quite supportive for Aboriginal people who are working in the sector?
Yes and no. I think you get clinical supervision by an Aboriginal worker as well.
Okay.
It'd be helpful as well, just so you can bounce things off them as well, but also work out what's not working and is working, because sometimes you're out there by yourself and you need a bit of guidance or direction, and to vet yourself because you're taking on a lot of people's issues. You need to work out what's working.
So that cultural mentoring and supervision is really important to support the workforce. Warren, what's your experience? You've been working in the sector for quite a while.
Yes.
What have been some of the challenges? What have been some of your thoughts?
The challenges are pretty similar to what everyone else has said, but I think the marrying up now of the detox and the rehab, like straight after the detox, there's a long wait, so
Right.
that's been a problem. Where they're situated, not enough. The boxes, you know, they can't smoke at some of them now. That's a big deterrent for a couple of dollars now too. And I think for me as a worker, it'd have to be the amount of stress on the worker, you know, like when someone's homeless or they've got an AVO out, they can't see their kids, you ride that roller coaster with your client. And especially when it's a cold night, you know that you might have to drop someone off at a cave or in the bush, and other services don't seem to want to, I don't know what's going on, but there's not much help out there for mental health services. A lot of people are struggling with mental health services, and we just need to all work together to manage the people the best we can, and rally governments and that to make sure that there's properly built healing centres for people with traumas and stuff like that, because that's where most of my clients get drug and alcohol and mental health issues, is from grief and loss and AVA, stuff like that.
So really, you're talking about a different way of working too, that there's an offer and opportunity to have something that is oriented around trauma and the idea of a healing, supportive space, I suppose, as well.
Yes, well, I think that's the way that, well, that's how I was trained when I went to college, and that's how the ADAN workforce try and relay how we need to work with our people, because we know what works. We work with our communities, we know our communities. We're not just 9 to 5 workers, they all know us outside of the community. We get stopped at football, we get told the stories and everything what's happening from both sides. The courts, they know who to come to when things are going on, so the local police. So it's pretty big for us. So we need to train more people the right way. And when we do get trained, we need to be able to use that training in the right way, like our CEOs and our workforces need to let us work how we need to work.
And so, and you've all mentioned that, which is that idea that it needs to be an investment, as you're saying, Lee, that it needs to be drawing on the practice wisdom, that understanding that the pressure and the weight of the responsibility, if you also live in community, is you don't clock off at the end of the day, and that will have a particular impact on you as a person. Brad, you've been in the sector for a long time. What do you, if you don't mind me saying, what do you feel like, you know what some of the challenges are, but what do you feel like over the years, have you seen much change?
First of all, I'd like to agree with everything being said here. And I think the underlying thing, when I started some 20-something years ago, 20-something years ago, the big problem was the ignorance. You know, I'd get called, I used to walk into, oh, this person needs to be this correct. I said, look, you're just another person. I said, you talk to them. And next minute, the courier would turn around and say, oh, you can go and get far away. And they're out the door. And they said, well, tick, no, it's gone. So it was a tick and flick thing. That's all it was. I mean, they're talking about we need to do all this sort of stuff. And the training and all that, that needs to be resourced.
Yeah.
And really does. And I'm talking about when a service gets money for Aboriginal people, they should be using that money for Aboriginal people and not tick and flick in their own boxes for other stuff. I've seen, you know, I'll use an example. I got called to the hospital about 25 years ago, and a bloke was having, they said he won't let us put these wires on him. He was Koori, and he's from Northern Territory. Now, I talked to him, he said, first time he's ever done it. They didn't ask the nurse, did you explain what was happening? No. And the nurse had come out of the nurse unit and said, we don't have to explain it to him. I said, I suggest you would. Over time now, they explained everything to the Koori and will relax them. You know, we've got a lot of clients who have faced a lot of crap in their life. you know. And, you know, like we were talking about, trying to get them into rehab, detoxes, all that sort of stuff. Now, it's a lot easier now than back then, but we're still running into barriers.
Yeah.
And it's a lot to do with resources. But, you know, it's great for all these other mental health and sexual get all this money. What about drug and alcohol? What about us? You know, we're fighting to stay in, trying to get workers into the area.
Yes.
They're not going to come where they're getting paid. Where will they go? So my big thing is, I don't want to see the drug and alcohol workforce, the Aboriginal one, slowly dissipate
Yes.
and disappear. And then we're going to go back to exactly where we were
Before.
before. And that's really spooky.
Yeah, it is. Very
We've
surprising.
progressed so much, it's not funny. I mean, who would have thought 20 years we'd have a group like this?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a great thing that's happened.
It's a big achievement, isn't
It's a
it?
big achievement, yes.
And it's interesting you talk about the workforce, Rachel, with the involvement and the growth of the audit project that you were talking about, Martin, and you are leading, Rachel. One of the outcomes that I noticed was some increasing in the employment of Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's important?
So first, can I just go back to something Brad
Yes, of
said
course you can.
about our workforce? So I've been speaking to some of the Aboriginal drug and alcohol workforce recently and getting to meet them, and some of our Aboriginal drug and alcohol workforce are in split roles, which I think like they may be the Aboriginal AOD worker plus a sexual health worker, or the Aboriginal AOD worker plus a mental health worker, Aboriginal health worker / Aboriginal AOD worker position it's a full-time position in its own. So I think we lack funding in this area for our workforce. That's you mentioned. Yeah. So what was the question?
So that's okay. So one of the outcomes that I saw was some positions for
Yes.
Aboriginal workers.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that as an outcome from a project.
Yeah. So when we went and did the baseline cultural audit baseline audit with the service, and then we ran a workshop with the service, and they developed an action plan about areas that they wanted to grow in, and a lot of the organisations wanted to employ Aboriginal workers. So a few services, we've gone back and we've done the third audit with services now, and some people have actually employed Aboriginal workers. Another big thing that come out of the audit project was connecting with community. I think that was one big outcome that I've seen from starting to see the results come in, just their connection in communities with Aboriginal organisations, with the actual community has been a good outcome. Because if you're going to deliver services in the community, and especially the Aboriginal community, you got to get out in community. Yeah.
And so those linkages are really important. And I suppose, one thing is obviously hiring Aboriginal staff and needing to grow the sector, the Aboriginal workforce within the sector, but keeping in mind the need for that support. And of course, you mentioned there, Martin, that you supervise Kylie, so you're in a more senior position, and some of you are also in senior positions, and how important there's also that it's workers, but also in senior management positions as well. Do you see that as being quite important?
I do. I think, first of all, that we have a lack of Aboriginal AOD workers across all platforms, local health districts, NGOs and AMSs. I think we need to increase that. I understand that, yes, we've increased it from 2003 until now, but when you consider the population, the Aboriginal population for the state, and then compare that to the number of Aboriginal drug and alcohol workers that we have, some of our workforce have in excess of 60 clients on their books. And that's, to me, is way too many clients to be responsible by one person.
Yeah.
So I think that is an issue, but I also think that we need to be encouraging, whether it be ADAN or whether it be our employers, organisations, we need to be encouraging and developing opportunities for Aboriginal drug and alcohol workers to move up and become middle management or senior management. And until that starts to happen and we get a voice at the table at that senior management level, I think we'll continue to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how long that will take, but I hope it's sooner rather than later.
And not just in identified roles either. We want them in.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to be identified as the Aboriginal, and I am identified as the Aboriginal manager for the Aboriginal Drug and Alcohol team, but not necessarily, as Rachel just said, not necessarily be in an identified position.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I did a cultural audit yesterday with an organisation, and they had some funding, and we were talking about recruitment, and they actually advertised 3 or 4 positions for Aboriginal drug and alcohol workers and didn't get anyone to apply. So then they've removed the identified part off their advert. They now have a team of Aboriginal drug and alcohol workers.
Wow. Okay.
Once they took the targeted identified logo from the position, Aboriginal people started to apply. So I think that's a shift across the board, that people don't want to be employed as the identified Aboriginal worker. They want to be identified just as an AOD worker, providing a service. Yeah, we provide a service to an Aboriginal community, but I'm sure not just the board here, but all Aboriginal AOD workers are providing a drug and alcohol service to non-Aboriginal people as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't not provide a service based on colour or race.
Yes.
Clients are clients at the end of the day.
So some of the positives that you're saying is that there are people that are doing the audits, they're engaging with those. There are opportunities where there's some senior leadership positions, but there needs to be more.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you think that have been quite positive over the time that you've been in drug and alcohol for Aboriginal people, whether they're clients or workers? Have you seen anything else that you feel like is good practice or are good examples of where they've got it right?
I think our symposium that we held yearly, we have all different workers from across New South Wales come in and talk about their programs that they run in their hometown. So it gives us ideas on trying to take back to our community to run the same sort of program. If it, like all communities are different, doesn't mean that it's going to work, but at least it's an idea of going back to your own community to try and work things out with other people's programs that they do in their own community. So I think our symposium is pretty big for other workers to come in and talk about their communities, how they work.
Fantastic, and demonstrates and celebrates the innovation too of the things that are going on that are really great. You got to say anything, Warren?
Pretty much what Kurt said, the upskilling of the workforce, just knowing that you're not alone and we can share the good things that we do. So that's a great thing to showcase at our symposium and other conferences that we go to, training, stuff like that. I think something that works really good down our way and probably would work everywhere is the men's and women's groups, where you can gather as a group of people and share trauma and heal together. I think that works really good in our area. So we've got some good results where other fellows mentors and elders can come and try and educate the younger fellows and show them that what detox and rehab is and how their life has changed once they decided to give up the drugs and alcohol. So just those sort of things, $200 a week, the bang for the buck's incredible.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I've worked with a lot of drug and alcohol workers over the years, a lot of non-Aboriginal ones. The way back then it was like, the non-Aboriginal workers say, this is what you got to do, but the Koori wouldn't know what the hell they're talking about, and they say, they're too hard to work with. What I'm saying is to the workers out there now, non-Aboriginal workers, if you come across an Aboriginal client, don't click and say they're too hard. Contact an Aboriginal worker who can sit there and explain everything to you.
Yep.
That's what you've got to do.
So that partnership you're talking about, Brad, is that you, any worker should invest in the time to take with the client, and where possible to collaborate with an Aboriginal worker alongside, you sharing your skills perhaps and making that person feel comfortable.
Well, I've had a counselling service ring me up and said, Brad, I'm doing this thing with this Aboriginal client, can you come along? So I've gone along with his permission, and I've sat in amongst it, and we sort of worked out what was happening and all this sort of stuff. So it worked out for the better. We don't say, oh, look, bugger off, you're going to do your own job. We'll work with them to make sure the client benefits. That's it.
That's been your experience.
Yeah, one of the really great things that I've seen over my working in drug and alcohol is finally, and it's quite small, but finally some inclusion in Aboriginal specific assessment tools and some validation in some of the tools. And I just think that, way back when we were all saying, it's better to sit under a tree and do stuff, and you can't evaluate that, and now, to see things like the GEM, which is totally pictures.
Yeah.
And they really get it, yet you put some of the other assessments in front of them and it's, pick 1, 2 or 3 and they just go, not sure, because they're not connecting with that assessment. It is just fabulous to see, and the stages of change, the Aboriginal one being used a lot more, I've seen in the last 12 months than the whole time that we were even doing the Irish training. It just really seems to have got some sort of validity, but it needs to be used a lot more, I believe. I believe it needs to be recognised, used across mainstream, used in non-government organisations. Posters put up everywhere.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, when we see clients for the first time, and I think the process is way too big, like people don't come into our AMS half addicted or half shot with mental health. They come in pretty much in crisis. That's how we see most of our clients, to be honest. And to make them sit down, book an appointment, if they've got high anxiety and everything else that goes with it, suicide, stuff like that, and we've got to sit down and make them do an assessment. I know it has to be done, but I think just thinking about, the GEM tool, more visual, stuff like shorter assessments, because it's not all about ticking the box. We're there to help the people. And it's a massive struggle for them, and it's a struggle for us to do a massive assessment. They're not going to come back if they know they've got to do an assessment. Then 2 weeks' time, they've got an appointment until they get allocated to that worker. We've just got to go.
Is that responding quickly?
Yeah, we all do bend rules a bit, I suppose, but that's what we're going to do to keep people alive.
But it's also that, sorry, Carly.
I was going to say, in my area, in Newcastle, we're in the process of moving to a new building, and one of the managers have just jumped on board. I'm on the moving committee, I'm on the design team. So it's like everything. We want culture. So it's been great. It's been really great to be included in that, because at first it was like no one was on there representing, and I kind of put my name up and was like, so.
But what you're talking about, Carly, and yourself, Warren, is also that it's less about trying to take some of those current tools that are quite, white oriented, and make them into something that's, more Aboriginal applicable, but actually to learn from Aboriginal ways of doing things and actually change the whole process. Because the things you're talking about there, Warren, about how we assess people and how we do an intake or what have you, I'm sure that they probably don't work for everybody, particularly if they're in crisis.
That's right.
So I think it's how do we also learn and actually embed what we know works from Aboriginal wisdom. I think we certainly learned that in terms of working better with family and community. We know that works for everybody, and that's a way of working that I have certainly learned from Aboriginal people. What do you think it would take to start to shift those sorts of things, to actually bring an Aboriginal lens more to the everyday working environments.
Red dust healing. I went and done red dust healing with Upper Tom Power. And red dust is not just it's opened my eyes on about Aboriginal ways and culture and all that kind of stuff, but it gives me knowledge to pass on to my clients. So it's he teaches me, and then I go and teach my clients, 50 different clients, and then that gets passed down through to them. So, and the way he's taught it and the way he teaches it is so good and so heartwarming that, you know, it just drains you, and it's very emotional, and it opens your eyes to all different things on how to deal with clients, and it's just not for Aboriginal workers, it's for non-Indigenous people as well, to go and learn about Aboriginal people and how in the Aboriginal way. So I really do recommend red dust healing.
That's great, thanks, Kurt. Which it might be a good opportunity now to remind people to send through your questions in the Q&A box. We do have one question I'm going to throw to Robert to ask the panel. Rob?
Thanks, everyone. I've just been reflecting on what you've been saying, and a lot of it is around the need to invest in the Aboriginal workforce and in Aboriginal people to support them. And I'm just thinking about the fact that the New South Wales government has spent a lot of money on 2 inquiries, the inquiry into regional rural rehabilitation and then the Special Commission of Inquiry, which had lots of recommendations that go to improving services for Aboriginal people, responding to the issue of demand and the long wait lists that people have. If you were, as a group, to provide some advice to government, they've come to you and said, okay, we need to prioritise the recommendations, what would be your advice to government to improve the current situation?
More money.
Come and see us.
Come and see
Come
us.
to us.
Yeah.
More collaboration with services and talk to on the ground staff and managers. Come and talk to us. Like mental health is a big one. Like people who, like I said, they don't come to us half. No one comes in half addicted or got, you know, I'm half an alcoholic, or I'm half, you know, my mental health's half done. They come in pretty much shot. So we need referral pathways, good strong pathways to mental health. People take it serious, like when we've got someone who says they're suicidal. Someone to take it serious.
The government
Somewhere to
needs
go.
to understand that, you know, for Aboriginal people and non-Aboriginal people as well, you know, there's not just the person who's sitting in front of you. There's a whole disadvantaged group of people in the community. And whilst we send people away to rehab, and that's fabulous, if we can get them in, they all come back to the dysfunction of their family, their community, and all of that. So the government needs to look at, okay, they don't like resi rehab anymore, and they're not really fond of outreach, detoxification and programs anymore, which is fabulous, don't be. So what's going to replace that? So are you going to set up for Aboriginal people, all you need to do is you need to set up a hub, if you like, that works with a family and a community in changing what's happening there and working within that community. Because if you don't work in that community, all you do is you send John away, he goes to rehab, he comes back and he commences using again within a very short period of time because his trauma and the community's issues haven't been dealt with. And until the government understands that they need to fix communities, and I'll just be biased for Aboriginal communities because they're my mob, but it's not only Aboriginal communities. That the despair that's out there these days because of, you know, COVID and all the rest of it is 100-fold of what it was prior to COVID, and it was pretty bad. You know, I ask a lot of young people, and I have a young grandson, you know, where do you think you'll be, you know, when you leave school? I have the youngest one who's doing quite well at school. And he's like, I don't know. What would I want to do? Well, you know, and even just having a dream of, I'll be a hip hop artist. It just all seems to be non-achievable and non-dreamable because of what's actually going on in the community. I mean, you know, he doesn't live in a he doesn't live in housing commission. So I can't imagine the disadvantage and the despair you would feel if you were a young person in housing commission with no directions. And it's not bad living in house, so don't get me wrong. I grew up in housing. It's not a bad thing, but there's so much despair there now that there's no pathways.
Yeah.
That's where you are. You're not going to have a job, and that's just your thing. So yes, you should be sad and depressed. So therefore, you would use drugs. Or receive some sort of treatment. I just don't see the government engaged in, you know, they put all their services together. It sounds like I'm banging on the government. They put all their services together because they thought that was a really good way to operate. So you've got Houso in the one-stop shop and the RTA or whatever they call it now, and the DCJs, DJCs or whatever they call it. They're all sitting in this one place, which is fabulous for people who can navigate that. I don't know why they don't take the same view for working out in community instead of sending, you know, I mean, Warren, he covers such an incredibly large area. Like he's one person for drug and alcohol for them. I think you've got two now, maybe, for the men, you know, and such a huge population of men down in the South Coast. But it's kind of, that's just deal with that, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think you know, once they do the detox rehab, which is great, they learn lots of tools there and that. But when they come out, they're going back to the same place. And recovery is a very lonely place, you know. Like you've lost all your mates, you can't go around and visit your mates anymore because they were what you used to use with. So after recovery groups and stuff like that, you know, I'll keep banging on about groups because I know they work. But yeah, we need things, community centres where we can start to upskill people, like get them, show them about what a carpenter does and give them some little trades and tastes and start transporting them out of the where they live, you know, in all these housing commissions. Not that we're blocks of flats and all that, where they live. We need to get them out and back into a social place where they don't feel alone, because everyone wants to be part of something, and whether it's a shit community or a good one, you just want to be part of something. So they normally go back to the drugs because they welcome them back.
Yes, because there's a belonging in that.
It's a belonging.
That's right.
Everyone wants to be part of the belonging.
They lose hope, and that's, you know, that's what needs to be put back into the community. Hope.
Yeah.
Hope for better things and a good life.
Yeah. So
and that's the problem. My concern is that the kids of today aren't going to be kids of tomorrow, because, you know, if the drug issues are happening, like with the mess getting around like it is now, and you can see the generations just being affected by it. The whole social thing sort of feels to me like it's crumbling.
Yeah.
And, you know, unless we address, you know, law, order and all that sort of stuff with the drug and with the alcohol issue, I mean, the meth and all that sort of stuff, we've got major problems. It's happening now. My concern, and I worry, and I do worry about my grandkids.
Yeah.
That scares the hell out of me.
Yeah.
You know, and I get people bringing their kids in there, terrific little kids running around and all that. And going fast forward 10 years, it just freaks me out.
Yeah.
You know? So,
And that's where that idea of hope is really important.
exactly.
And I feel like what you've all been saying is that there's a real opportunity for all of us to do more. And that certainly fits with the theme of Reconciliation Week, that it's about not just all the talk, but it's about the action. And I wonder, as we start to close things up today, if there's one thing that you would say to somebody as part of doing more to support the workforce, to support Aboriginal people, is there one thing that people would say that they would like to leave people with?
For me, it's supporting your staff and providing your staff with the opportunity to upskill. I know we have so many members of ADAN who are in the AOD work, the AOD industry or field. They have no idea what they're doing. they've come across from being a dental assistant or a sexual health worker. They have no idea how to work with a client, no idea about what drugs are out there, how to work with other agencies. So I think my big take-home message would be provide and allow your staff to upskill, to go away and develop skills, pick up, more than Cert 4. I'm not knocking Cert 4. It's a good starting point, but I think we should be more supported as a workforce to complete diplomas in counselling, to complete a degree. We're not, I'll say it now, we're not done.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing. We know our community. We know our mob. We need to be supported as an Aboriginal drug and alcohol workforce to be upskilled. And until we're supported to be upskilled, I think we'll be stagnant. And that to me is a huge shame.
Well, thank you. So we're out of time now, but I do want to thank everybody for joining us today, and in particular to thank the ADAN Board of Directors that have joined us today. We really appreciate it. We've got lots of things to think about as an organisation in how we support the drug and alcohol workforce, but in particular, we recognise the real importance of taking action, that we all have a responsibility. And if you do work alongside an Aboriginal worker and an Aboriginal colleague or among your clients, find out from them what it is that's useful to them, how you can do better, and to support them in the best way that's best for them. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you do want to have any additional questions, you can send them through and we will respond to you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Susie.
Thank you.